Glad to be back. Great to be here this afternoon. I am here with Karen Colberg, the CEO of King Arthur Baking Company, which is a Vermont-based company of about 400 people. It has been around since 1790, selling... that is not what I meant. Selling flour and baking supplies and many things you've seen in your grocery stores. And next to her is Pete Stavros, who is the global co-head of private equity at investment giant KKR. He leads a unit that $230 billion under management, is that right? Okay, so many of you are probably looking at this going, wait, private equity and baking. Why do you have these two people on stage together? But they actually have a lot more in common than you may think. We're here today to talk about employee ownership and whatever form it takes, whether that's profit sharing or an ESOP or broad-based employee equity. There's a real role for companies to take in providing some kind of ownership and also building employee ownership cultures, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So King Arthur Baking has been 100% employee owned for more than 20 years. At KKR, Stavros has been leading a campaign to bring employee ownership to nearly 100 of the firm's portfolio companies. He's also founded a nonprofit, Ownership Works, that's aimed at growing this idea even further. So we're going to start by just sort of digging into what this actually means at your companies. So Pete, maybe we can start with you. You started on this journey, interestingly, I think from your dad was a hourly employee, and you saw over time that he did not have the kind of incentives to work like he would if he had some kind of ownership in the business. You studied it at HBS. You tried out this model at a garage door company. Can you briefly explain how this works at KKR so that we have a sense of what we're talking about?
Sure. So we started this 2011.
Okay.
And the first time we did it, it was with a safety equipment company called Capital Safety.
Okay.
So if you've seen workers up on construction buildings or on a bridge, they have these harnesses, and the harnesses are attached to the structure. It's a safety device. And what we found quickly was there was a significant issue with the workforce. Many issues. One was actually, ironically, safety. So there were a lot of safety issues in the plants that we were caught unaware. The quit rate was high. The engagement scores weren't even measured. And we tried ownership in that example as a way to get people to stay. We did a horrible job at it. We didn't do any of the culture building work that I'm sure we'll talk about. Yep. And so it was like a nice thing to do, but it didn't really shift the culture. And then, years now, here we are in 2026, we're rolling out one of these new programs every other week with a new company. We're approaching probably 250,000 frontline workers with ownership, and our approach, while still developing, is much more sophisticated around getting people bought in.
Yeah. And 22 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, you started the ESOP at King Arthur Baking, is that right?
1996.
Oh, okay, so even older. And tell me a little bit about why. What was the thinking, and what does that mean for the workers at King Arthur?
So King Arthur was family owned for 5 generations, and there was not a next gen wanting to come into ownership. And the family still lives in the town where we are. Basically, believed that the best stewards of their vision and their mission were the employees of the company. And so that was the path they wanted to take. And it started in 96 and over 3 tranches. 2004, we became 100% employee owned. And the way that works, just really quickly, is you work 800 hours within 12 months of starting at the company, and you are in the ESOP. It's a qualified retirement plan, and it's 100% company funded.
Okay, so it's given to them. They don't. It's not a purchase.
It's not a purchase. Mm-hmm.
So we're at a summit about employee.
They work for it.
They work for it. There you go. Not given. They work for a year for it.
Hard.
So we're at a summit about employee brand, and I'm curious to hear how much of a factor is this for you, Karen, as part of your recruiting story? Is it something that attracts people to know I'm going to get shares in this company?
Yes, I think so. I think we talk about employee ownership I'll say, in any venue or platform that of ours or that is given to us like this, because it's so important in defining to who we are. And it's really important when people come to the company that we're explaining to them in that journey of recruiting, if you will, that, you know, coming here, we believe in the sort of the collective efforts of all, and that all employees will benefit from the success or deal with the realities when we have challenges, but that we're all in it together. And so the recruiting story is, it comes to life so it's out there, because when the first question, you get to an interview, the first question people ask is, what does it mean to me financially, and what is this employee ownership thing, and what does it mean culturally? And they're very interested, and we explain how it works, how we fund it, and what they can expect over time. And again, next, I think specifics help. You know, we target, you know, somewhere between, you know, 10 to 20% of compensation going into the, you know, funding annually, and we revisit that annually because it's all performance dependent.
And Pete, you've talked a lot about how much you've seen turnover go down often when you implement a plan like this, so that it really drops turnover. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen in that regard?
Yeah, I would say when it works.
When it works.
Yeah, employee ownership.
I like how candid you are.
Well, it's an investment. It's like anything else. It's not a guarantee. It's not magic. But when all the cultural hard work is done, we've seen a median quit rate drop of 30%. So it's a big drop. Sometimes nothing happens, though.
Right.
If the leadership team isn't really bought in, isn't doing all the hard work, the quit rates go sideways, the engagement scores don't move. But we have, you know, Ingersoll Rand, a public company with 20,000 workers. The quit rate dropped so much, we're now hiring thousands of fewer people every year. You know, think about the impact on the company, not having to recruit, onboard, retrain, offboard the people who are leaving, all the paperwork, all the administration. I mean, it's a massive impact on the business.
Now, you've talked about, like, there's some companies where it does work, some that it didn't, and one of the big things you saw in terms of a difference maker is the leaders themselves, and you actually kind of did a big study with Stanford, I think, on this. What did you find?
Oh, gosh. I can tell you're a reporter, you're thorough. I'll try not to go on too long about this, but what happened was we saw this divergence where sometimes the culture was really shifting and sometimes it wasn't. And anecdotally, what I observed was where the culture shift was really happening, there was something inside the leadership, really the CEO, that was really genuine, and the excitement around the ownership program was coming from a place of, I could lift up thousands of workers at this company, and that was what inspired them. Not, I could get a little, more productivity, but it was coming from something deep within them.
And you recognize some kind of empathy as like a...
Not initially.
No,
so
okay.
Initially, what we observed was, this is going to sound terrible, but we observed women, or there's a lot of women here, so maybe it won't sound terrible. Women were better at this. CEOs who grew up poor were better at it. CEOs of deep religious faith, CEOs who were immigrants. And what I did not understand was the common thread was empathy.
Yeah.
Again, it sounds terrible because these are generalizations, but...
I think there's a lot of people in this room that would probably agree with you, though. So.
Yeah. So I was talking about this at a conference, and I think New York Times did like a tiny blurb on it, or Axios did a tiny blurb on it, and a professor at Stanford, who's the world leading expert in empathy, saw it, and he said, I would like to come in and study the empathy of your CEOs who do a great job with this program. So it's amazing, but you can actually measure someone's empathy. So he came in, measured this empathy of all of our CEOs, and then we gave him all the data on quit rates and engagement scores, and there was this massive correlation. So more empathic CEOs had workforces that were less likely to quit and more engaged on the job. So from there, then we worked with Stanford to build an empathy gym. So we put our CEOs now through empathy training. So they go to Stanford. You can put all your CEOs through it. A lot of CHRO people here, I understand. So you can put your CEOs through empathy training. So they go to Stanford. They train for 2 days on things like active listening, perspective taking. Then we have them go into their local community, and they do things like take out payday loans. They try and open up checking accounts without a large initial balance. They see what all this is like. And then we have them do frontline work. And so all of those things together, then they go back to Stanford, they get measured again, and then we're trying to prove not just correlation, but causation. So if we can grow the empathy of our leadership team, what happens to the employee base?
And there's some connection between performance and the empathetic leadership?
It's really hard to, even before getting into empathy, Karen and I are big believers in ownership. It's really, really difficult to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that ownership itself or empathy or any individual factor is driving performance.
Right.
It's like pretty much impossible.
Yeah.
I've talked to every academic out there on this, and the ideas they come up with on how to prove it are interesting but not practical. Like, for example, let's take 50 of your companies, Pete, and inside each of those companies, we'll divide the workforce in two. Half the workforce will get ownership, half of it won't. And our
that doesn't go over very well.
One CEO looked at me and asked me if I was insane.
Yeah.
So obviously connected to this is, we've talked a lot about trust and how you build that trust. You guys have a very open book philosophy to management and leading King Arthur. How does that help build that trust?
So one of the kind of founding family, I feel often just sort of lucky to have I've been at King Arthur for 21 years, and to be the steward of that vision and the values, and so they're foundational, and they were very committed from the get-go to open book management. And so what that means for us is we create a lot, I'll go through some tactics of things that we do, but just we really want people to know how the business is being planned, what the goals are, how we're holding ourselves accountable, individuals accountable. And in order to do, you can say that, but you have to have just sort of practices in place, and you have to live it in order for it to be true and for it to be impactful. And so we have town meetings bi-weekly. We share the performance of the company. We create space for questions. We publish the financials. They're readily available. If you're not able to attend or at a town meeting at any point in time, you can go look at them. You can dig in, because we can't cover every area at every town meeting. But people can go in and ask. And I think a really key piece of making, I'm going to say, the open book management sort of real is there's training. There's very accessible training. We call them brain foods. And they're about financial literacy. They're about how to read the P&L. They're about how to access the Power BI portal so that you can avail yourselves of information.
You want to make sure people are understanding what they're looking at and what they're managing.
Right. And so and that's just the town meetings and the financials, and then we do a lot of other things to make sure, to ask how are we doing at that,
right?
Particularly with an engagement survey annually. So we're constantly, not constantly, it feels like constantly, but you're trying to check in with not just we're a small company, we're 400, but individually knowing what's going on with people and with teams, and then acting on it. I think the key piece is acting on it, so that people feel they have that opportunity to ask questions, they feel seen, they feel heard.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of trust, Pete, you go. KKR comes into a company, buys a company. You've got this frontline workforce. What have you learned about building trust in the first 90 days with that group? Because I would imagine they're often like, I'm not sure if I'm going to trust you guys.
Yeah. I wish it were 90 days.
Okay.
Lots of arms folded, eyes down. People don't believe it and don't understand it. Is a whole nother issue. So it's a multi-year effort that the leadership team has to take on around trust building.
Right.
And I often talk to our CEOs about building trust in the same way you do with another human being. So how do you build trust with someone? You do what you say you're going to do. You tell them the truth. You're transparent. And so on this, take an engagement survey as an example. Most companies do engagement surveys, and that's kind of it. They might report aggregate scores. We try and get our CEOs to share the totality of the engagement scores back, every aspect of it. They're usually not great. We all know that the Gallup survey scores, on average, 70% of Americans basically don't like their jobs. And then, to Karen's point, actually acting on it. So, and you can build trust. There are shortcuts to building trust. So if you're going to, let's say you do an engagement survey and what comes back is people don't feel recognized, they don't feel they have all the resources they need to do their job well, or whatever it is. We encourage our CEOs to commit themselves to acting on those things before they quietly go off and just act on them, because that's another opportunity to build trust, because you get a chance to do what you said you were going to do. So we encourage them to go back in front of the workforce, share the results, say, here's what we heard, here's the 2 or 3 things that are really bad, and you're going to see action in 3 months, 6 months, and then come back and do it again.
Right.
And that's between that and some of the transparency Karen talked about. I think you can build trust, and it doesn't need to take forever, but it's definitely not 90 days.
So,
And that works.
Oh, yeah, go
We do
ahead.
exactly what Peter's describing in terms of you get out there, you do the survey, and you have to pick 2 or 3 things that you're going to work on. And you got to say you're going to work on them.
Follow up.
And then that's what the regular, whether it's the regular town meetings, quarterly business reviews, all the things that you'd expect. But you got to make sure that you got to pick the few things you're going to talk about, and you got to talk about them.
So we're living in a period of extreme financial inequality. It feels like, I'm curious, what else do you do besides the ESOP to help, employees deal with inflation and with, the cost of living? Are there some other things? And then Pete, I'd love to quickly get a take from you about, I know there's a lot of policy changes happening efforts happening around ESOPs, and I'd be interested in your take on that. But Karen, what do you guys do in that regard?
So, one of the first things, you asked about what else besides, so pay is obviously critically important, and we do a lot of work with compensation to make sure it's as fair as it can be, competitive externally, competitive internally. We do have longer tenure in ESOPs relative to non-ESOPs, and so when you're growing and you're hiring people externally, you got to really pay attention to that internal equity piece, and we strive to do all that, and it's incredibly expensive out there, everywhere. Healthcare, all those things. So a couple of things that we do. For healthcare, we have sliding scale, so if you make more, you pay more. For premiums, which is not the most popular thing, but it's important, and it's impactful. We have profit sharing, so we pay profit sharing annually, target 10%, and revisit that annually. And right now, we're in the process of creating a more short-term incentive program so that we can get that to people sooner.
Yep.
And then the last thing there's several, but we also, we give people 40 hours a year of volunteering time. And I share that because people can volunteer in their schools. People are with their children's schools. So if people have family and work-life balance is challenging and trying to, to do everything, giving someone an opportunity to go to their children's school, get paid while you're there, but to volunteer for something is really meaningful for people. So we have volunteering. Volunteering is really important.
Does that mean our time is up?
Sorry.
We're close, though. So.
Well, 2 more quick things, and these are more modest but meaningful. As a, employee-owned baking company, we subsidize CSAs, community supported agriculture.
Yep.
If people choose. We're going to start dancing.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I was going to say they want us to do something.
So people,
great.
if they
That's
choose,
great.
and then free bread.
Free bread, of course. Right. Who doesn't want free bread?
Doesn't want free bread.
Pete, can you beat free bread?
No.
Sorry. It's really good bread too.
No, I am curious. Like, what would you? There's a lot of these, policy ideas out there. What would you most like to see happen to increase, the amount of ways people can have access to ownership of the companies they work in?
If you, a lot of economists will focus on what's opened up as a gap between real wage growth, so wages net of inflation relative to productivity in the economy. So the last 40 years, you'll often hear economists say productivity has grown 80% over 40 years and real wages are up 20. So workers are out 60% over 40 years. That's a big problem. Over that same 40 years, the stock market's up 9,000%. So workers could have been keeping up with productivity and they would have gotten absolutely slammed by the asset price appreciation, which they see in housing and all over the place. So I think ESOPs are our best hope. ESOPs, without going too far into it, it's a tax structure. It started in 1974, and it gives companies a tax break to give ownership to workers. Karen's version of it, or King Arthur Baking's version of it, is kind of like the ideal version. Workers own all of the company, but it's expensive. The taxes, Karen's company pays no taxes forever. So it's not a tax break, it's tax exemption. We're not going to have every company in America be a tax exempt organization. So what we want to do is keep these models because what it does for workers is like amazing, but we need also a practical version for bigger companies.
Yep.
And so what Jena and I had talked about was, what if workers own 3, 4, 5% of every company in the country? I mean, could you imagine how different the economy would be, how different the country would be if everybody felt like they had a stake in the business that they work at. And that's what we're after with policy is let's keep this lane open, which is incredible, but let's acknowledge it's not going to work with every company, and let's find a way for workers to own a piece of everything.
I'm going to give you both like just one more just 10-second answer, but there's a lot of people in this room who obviously are not going to start an ESOP or be able to give 5% of their company. What is the one thing you would say will really help build an ownership culture that, like the thing to focus on to do that at a company that doesn't have employee ownership or an ESOP? Yes, you first.
10 seconds. I would say everything we're talking about here, and we're talking about ESOPs, at least the way I show up and the way what I expect of leaders is what we're talking about is not unique to ESOPs. Know what you're expecting of people. Be clear. Communicate well. Engage people in the process, and tell them what you want from them, and then hold yourself accountable and other people accountable to the results of the business. And the shared outcomes, regardless of employee ownership, I think will deliver for any business.
Yeah. And Pete,
And I would
final
say,
word?
giving people a say. So worker voice is, I think, the most important thing that you can do. So those engagement surveys, act on them, do something with that information that you solicit from folks. When people quit, I mean, one of the things that drives me crazy is we need to bring data back to HR. So a lot of our HR leaders, we're operating too much on anecdotes, and we know people are quitting, so let's do really robust exit surveys. Why are people leaving? We can get information, and then let's go back, do a Pareto analysis. What are the big issues? Address the big issues, why people are quitting. You can drive engagement and retention through data, and I think I see just way too much management by anecdote as opposed to data.
Amen.
Well, amen. Thank you both to Karen and to Pete. I really enjoyed having you both, and I'm going to welcome Kevin Delaney back to the stage.